Welcome to the Quick Start video for Unit 11 featuring arrays. Here's what we'll cover. We'll introduce the learning goals and computer science concepts. We'll call your attention to important preparation, including additional materials to play sound in Lesson C. And we'll summarize each lesson's main activity, focusing most on the unique unplugged activity in Lesson A. Feel free to have the unit materials open as you watch so you can pause at any point to look at them in more detail. During this unit, students will explain the steps that they would take to sort a series of numbers. They'll learn to recognize 3 common sorting algorithms. They'll learn common array operations and practice creating, storing, and retrieving values in arrays. And finally, students will create a musical instrument that uses a microbit and a program that effectively uses arrays to store data. Now, if you collect something like rocks or coins, at some point you need to have a way to organize the collection so you can easily find your items. As your MakeCode programs get more complicated and require more variables to keep track of, you need a way to store and organize the data. And an array helps you do just that. It's a collection or list of similar data. The array blocks are found under the Advanced Toolbox menu. Now you create an array by assigning it to a variable that stores values of the same type, like numbers, strings, or sprites. Now for example, this array is assigned to a variable called list, and it holds string data. Every spot in an array is identified by its index, which is a number that corresponds to its location. The first slot is always index 0. Then the next is 1, then 2, and so on. Now the length of an array refers to the total number of items, and because the index numbering starts at 0, the length is always the index of the last item plus 1, which is 4 in this example. Now for the unit level preparation, you have the typical steps of reviewing materials and practicing all activities. Now for Lesson A, most of your prep is going to be making decisions. So you'll want to watch the array sorting videos that are linked in the sidebar content and decide if you want to show any of those to your students during class or possibly assign them to your students to watch either before or after the lesson. And your unplugged activity is going to need 10 sheets of paper numbered 1 through 10. Now you can make these in advance, or you can have your students create them at the beginning of the activity, up to you. But in the activity, you're going to demonstrate 3 common sorting options with actual people, with student volunteers, and they're going to represent data points. Now optionally, there is pseudocode and MakeCode versions of each sorting algorithm also provided to reinforce your demonstrations. And so again, you should decide if you want to show those to your students during class or assign them for review before or after the lesson. And there's also another YouTube video as sidebar content after the unplugged activity for you to consider showing your students. Now, Lesson B has the usual prep of just having the hardware ready and then printing the quizzes. In addition to the usual prep in Lesson C, you'll want to make sure you have the additional materials for sound because students are going to be creating a microbit musical instrument. And if you have the original microbits before version 2, they don't have a built-in speaker, so you'll need to attach them with crocodile clips to a set of earbuds or headphones. Version 2 forward, they have a speaker, so you're already set for that. Now in the unplugged activity in Lesson A, your students are going to experience different sorting methods. And so to set up, what you'll do is ask for volunteers. You'll mix up the numbered sheets and you give 1 to each person so that they represent number elements in the array. Now for the initial sort, you'll ask the remaining volunteer to move the other volunteers in line, 1 at a time, into numeric order. Most likely they'll be swapping places with other people in the array. And then you'll lead a discussion to outline the steps that were taken. Now the next part of the activity is going to demonstrate each of these three common sorting methods. So you'll start with bubble sort by following the text instructions or the provided diagram. And then depending on your preparation decisions, right, you might decide to review the pseudocode and make code examples in class, and then you'll use the same approach to demonstrate the steps of a selection sort and an insertion sort. But those are the three basic sorting algorithms: bubble sort, insertion sort, selection sort. Now, lesson B has three coding activities. So the first activity is coding a headband charades game using an array with string elements. The second activity is coding sets of random sprites as constellations of stars on the microbit screen using arrays with number elements and math operations. And the third activity is basically coding a special loop with arrays that proceeds through each element in sequence. So they'll go over how to traverse an array, which is a pretty fundamental operation, very important for them to get practice with. And then finally, in lesson C, your students will code a program that uses arrays to store sequences of notes and build a musical instrument of some sort that uses the microbit. So one example is a microbit guitar with links to a tutorial and also a YouTube video so that they can actually see it in action. The other example is a banana keyboard with links to a tutorial. You have to supply your own banana. And that's it. Best wishes for another fun and musical unit that your students are sure to enjoy.